I have a hi. So I'm going to introduce you guys to my work. My name's Katie Jurkiewicz. We've already been chatting. But uh, if you don't mind, is the share screen option on? Let's see. Let's make it a little more visually interesting than my face. Okay, so you're seeing what I call the scenic route group of paintings that I did. There's seven that you have, but it's a much larger collection of paintings. But we'll just start with some of my other paintings that I have going on. I'm a landscape painter, and let's go back. They're these are some of my other paintings. I paint only paintings of places that I've been to, that I've seen with my own two eyes. They're usually largely very interpretive. They're pretty colorful. They're lack in shadows and details. As you can see, I tend to paint on raw canvas with acrylic paint in large quantities. So it's really soaks right through the canvas. I don't gesso my canvases at all. It kind of makes it so it has a little bit more of oil painting feel for, that's what a lot of people kind of say to me when they go and see them. I did a whole South of France series. So that's pretty consistent across my work is kind of the brush strokes, the color, the kind of drawing with paint thing. Um, Oftentimes visually observed, then maybe drawn and maybe reference some photos, but also sometimes just from memory, the idea of what you saw. There's a couple paintings that are in this series that are really like, it struck me the idea of the painting more than the actual thing that I saw. So, as you can see, the scale is often really, really large. This is, I think this painting is like 16 feet long. So I do have some really large work. Another reason why I like to paint on unstretched canvas. It's the quality of the work that I like as as far as the texture. I really like when I exhibit it and people often say to me, "Oh my goodness, it's on fabric." It's like, well, most stretched paintings on canvas are on fabric, but people don't really think of it that way. So I think like having it unstretched and kind of hanging and, people always ask to touch it. I'm okay with that. There's kind of a tactile nature to my work, so I'm very fine with people just going at it, having a feel. Also, obviously, as we were talking earlier, for logistics reasons, it's really convenient to have the work be unstretched. Can't imagine how I would ever store, ship, or exhibit a piece like this if I wasn't doing that. So, what else do we have? So, I'm mostly a landscape painter, but I also paint a lot of plants. I have a current show also in Northampton, Massachusetts right now. That's all, I think I have 18 pieces of plant paintings up there. And they're usually this kind of upfront, up close, less depth than, say, my landscapes, where I do still have a, foreground, medium ground, distance kind of approach. As you can see, the one behind me is similar. This one is a 12-foot large, very large painting as well. Here are some other ones that are being exhibited that are, you kind of get the idea of my work, which is very kind of invent and feel my own way towards the color. So I went on a trip 2 years ago. We flew to California and we rented a car and we drove home. And I was most taken with the Southwest as far as our trip goes. So this is a sense of just some of the photos of what I observed, and then we'll talk about the paintings that I made from them. So as you can see, the landscape is at times colorful, but also very washed out compared to how I maybe it felt in the moment and how I imagined it. So we have the, Grand Canyon on the right. We have the Hoover Dam. We have just, I took a lot of pictures of just the open road, into Monument Valley. We saw untold numbers of bluffs and mesas. And, it was a beautiful trip. It was a lot of empty country. I think we kind of we'll go through the kind of the route with the paintings, but Up until maybe Texas, I was very interested in the landscape. And then past Texas, it became very similar to ours. It was beautiful. There was a lot of lush green hills and things, but it didn't feel all that different from the East Coast. So I was quite taken with it because it felt so um, almost alien to me. So it was something that I wanted to do as a series. So we have a lot of, like I said, bright sunshine, bleached out exteriors, and then there's kind of my interpretation of them. So I decided I'm going to give you the whole series, including the seven that are there. Um, so we're started in California. So this is a famous Kaijon Pass, I believe is it. It's uh it's where the San Andreas Fault kind of goes right through the San Gabriel Mountains. And there's a kind of a famous, for people who watch trains, spot where the kind of different train tracks come together and the boxcars kind of run through. So this is not necessarily in the order that I painted it. There's a couple things I'm going to point out about how the style evolved as I worked on this series for about a year and a half. But this is in geographical order. So we were kind of driving through a lot of empty space, and I think what really struck me about this landscape was just the boxcars that went on for infinity. So that was kind of the idea of this painting. And then we kind of moved into the Mojave Desert area. So there's a lot of Joshua trees. So this is a painting of a Joshua tree. I think I titled this one Mojave. It's in the show. Kind of using the blue to break up the really like bleached brightness of the sky was kind of my idea on this one. And I kind of did two more. So I think this one is also in the show. And it was, wanting to really get that blue sky, whereas I didn't quite achieve the same like bleached out desert feel. So I had to go with kind of a brightness for the background mountains to really, break up the color. And I did, I think, one more in that series. That's of the Joshua trees. This is, I think, Return to Joshua Tree. We, excuse me, passed through from so California heading to Las Vegas is pretty much Mojave Desert area. Went a little off the path to catch some of this. And I ended up in Vegas, and that's actually where we got married for one day and then headed towards the Grand Canyon, but stopping at the Hoover Dam on the way there. So this one was, I think I showed a picture of the dam. While I have the structures very similar, the color scheme ended up going completely bananas because it was just a very, um, I don't know, kind of surreal landscape if anyone's seen it. It's just really wanted to draw attention to the dam itself and the structures, but also that really impressive bridge behind you that the highway goes over. There was just a lot to try to break up. So I kind of went really bold and candy colored with the colors to kind of do that. So then I ended up at the Grand Canyon, which I painted several times. And in these three paintings, there's one that's hanging in the show. You can kind of see the progression of the ideas of making the canyon. This was more of a straightforward idea of the layers exactly as I kind of try to see them, the rock layer, the stones, all the plants, and I think I got more abstracted in the way I was thinking about this series as time went on. The other thing I'm going to ask you to pay attention to that I want to always point out is that almost all of these paintings have a very random animal in them somewhere. So this one has a lizard down here, and the boxcars had a giraffe in one of the boxcars. And I think there's always a lot of snakes and bugs to be seen, but that's just something I hide in most of my paintings. So this was more of a straightforward interpretation. Started getting a little more fanciful of how to break up the different stone areas with bright color patches, which is an idea. These paintings probably came first when I came home, was painting the Grand Canyon, these two, and how I could approach that. which led to this third one, which is actually the last painting I painted in the whole group of paintings that's in that show, which was really getting very abstracted of just thinking about color fields and areas of vertical lines to break up the stones to get the feeling of height. I think you'll see in some of the other paintings that are in that show, kind of the ideas that I broke through with those is what led me to start to just get way more abstracted with the stonework that I was doing in this series, which I really like. I think that's where I'd like to go forward is there's about three paintings that I feel like are really interesting direction for me that feel less um, direct interpretation, way more my version of things. So that's our Grand Canyon. So from the Grand Canyon, we head through Arizona and up into this is in the Arizona-Utah border, this Monument Valley. Got a flat tire at the Grand Canyon. Well, not flat, but like tire light and driving through in the middle of nowhere. The only tire store we found in Tuba, Arizona said we would have certainly had a flat that day if we hadn't stopped. So thank you to them for that $15 repair that kept us from having a flat in the middle of nowhere. And this is Monument Valley, another early painting in the series, but starting to get those ideas of like big chunks of color to just kind of break up the landscape and the language of the small rocks as circles. I think for me, it's a lot of this kind of developing symbols and kind of like a way of approaching different items in the landscape that kind of carry through the whole series, but also change over time. So literally going to drive down that road where that turtle is crossing the road. Excuse me, not turtle, armadillo. Crossing down that road is this road continues right almost exactly at the Arizona-Utah border. And this painting did come after those first two Grand Canyon paintings and the Monument Valley one, where I did start to really get more abstracted with color and just play a little more with how they talk to each other, the yellows and the oranges and the vertical lines to really get that, cut through the stone kind of feel. I really wanted to make this one larger so you get the sense of, the kind of wide vista landscape. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's impressive as a person who's mostly on the East Coast is you're always here, there's trees, you can never really see that far into the distance. So how many times you would just be on a road, you would never see a person, you would never see a car, you feel like you could see for 300 miles away practically, and there'd just be openness. So I really wanted to convey that with this painting. Just the wide open stretch of the road that continues down. So, actually, I went out of order. This one was right before we went to Monument Valley. This is part of that idea of really starting to abstract and break down the landscape into its shapes and its color forms. So this is there's an overlook of the Little Colorado River. As you come down through the Grand Canyon National Park, there's a couple of national forests, and this is a gorge, an overlook that you can see. I really started to break down, just stones individually and, rock tumbles, which, appeared in real life a lot more gray and brown. But I feel like the color, it gives you more of the sense of the feeling of being there. It felt very bright and felt very like alive. Also have some hidden dinosaur over there in the corner. And this one is the same location. This one came first, and this was more of an idea of I feel like I was semi-successful with it with the idea of breaking down the landscape in abstract forms, but didn't quite integrate it with the foreground overlook. So I feel like I did the other one which I feel was more successful than this one, but I think this was working towards that idea of really kind of abstracting the stone layers. So that we come to this one, which is in the exhibition there. This is Mexican Hat, Utah, which is right over the border. And this is one of those paintings where it was as much the idea of the painting, driving across that bridge that spanned and you take a very sharp right is the road. And I was driving the car and it just felt very intense. All this red, the river, you're moving fast. It just seemed like an unbelievable sight. Like we never got a really good photo of it. We didn't see, this was largely imagined but referenced with going into Google and being like, what did I actually see what I thought I saw? And yes, I did. But it's a lot more of how I remember it than how it necessarily is because it just felt like this very intense scene of red rock stones, bright skies, rushing water. Everything just seemed very like on. And there's a couple places where you drove across the country and you had these impressions in your head that these were like the scenes, but you didn't have a very good image of them, and it's hard to convey. So this was one that was really like it felt very intense for me and like something I wanted to share with people, but I didn't have a photo that I could. So this was the only way to really recreate that feeling. This was one of those last paintings I did. It's not in the show because someone bought it, but it would have been a good companion piece. Valley of the Gods in Utah. Um, kind of the very intense sky that was going on, and just the kind of breaking up the landscape into its component parts, really kind of taking shape and the different things going out into the distance. So that takes us to this painting, which is in New Mexico, which kind of you come over a road and there's a turnout and this turn in the river. I don't know how to say the town, Abiquiu. It's where George O'Keeffe lived. Um, and in my head, once again, it was one of those ones that just felt so amazing and intense. And then when I looked at my camera, the phone afterwards, it was very disappointing. So this was me trying to convey that just beautiful view and the wide open landscape and so much going on, distant mountains, close mountains, hills, rocks, everything. So I do tend to get a little like literally granular with little individual rocks and stones. And then this is the last of the series and the last in space as we're running through flatter land. I started becoming more obsessed with the windmills from the wind farms, which are everywhere, especially in Texas as you drive across just miles and miles and miles of flatland and wind farms. So that's where we get our final painting and kind of getting the same idea of very intense sky, even though it was always clear. It felt very, very cloudy and very kind of, um, windy and just a lot of motion going on. So I wanted to use the way I painted the brushstrokes, the colors to kind of get that motion going and also kind of work with the items that we're talking about here, which is, it's a wind farm. Everything is flying by, even though obviously this is a static image to kind of get the sense of motion. I think that is the last one of the series. So that is where I get the ideas for this work, and that kind of translates perfectly to about our point where if there's any questions, comments.
Guys are beautiful. They're just like really beautiful.
I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate all of the use of pink. I notice a lot of outlines, and I love how wavy and loopy everything is. It gives it a lot of movement.
Thank you. Pink has become my signature color, and I try to put it in every painting.
Yeah,
I just feel like, it's a good one to use because people don't. I'm terrible with a straight line, so everything becomes wavy and loopy.
really appreciate like the abstract interpretation and everything too.
Thank you. That's where I really feel like I'm moving with the landscapes. I used to be a lot more literal. I mean, and I still am sometimes, but I think there's something fun about really breaking it down to suggest stones, rocks, cliffs, instead of being so explicit about them. Um,
I like how some of them are from like real life reference photos and some of them are from your memory. which I find very interesting and very creative.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Oh, you're welcome, Katie.
My son lives in Tucson, and
Arizona.
every time I go out, I try to venture a little further. And I really, really appreciate your how fluid and how you put color into what you're seeing. And when I go out next time, I'm going to have a different view of of the area. And I really appreciate this. I'm so glad that I was able to see your paintings. They really are awesome.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to say I think they are gorgeous in person. I really seeing like just the photos, like the pictures of them now, but like that face to face, like visualizing seeing it because of the size and just the vibrancy of the colors used. So bravo, it's really gorgeous work. I really was it moved me.
Thank you. I do feel very strongly about large being my size as far as the paintings go, and I think I want to kind of encompass people in, whether it's landscape or it's plant work, um, in the scenery, like they're in painting. I don't really like to have it be too small. I think that like the physicalness of the work, it's hard to translate into photos because you don't really catch the colors right. You don't really catch the textures right. I do think it's work that should be enjoyed in person more than, digitally. Of course, we're in a digital world, but I think that's one of the reasons I like to paint. It is kind of the opposite of the digital world. It's such a physical process in the real world. I paint by rolling out giant canvases on the floor. I sit on them, I walk on them. I'm living on them while I'm painting them. Sometimes it takes weeks. So it just feels like a very like hands-on thing that you're doing in the real world as opposed to this, digital abstracted life you're living in the rest of the time, whether it's in your social world or, a lot of the times I'm working on websites and posters for clients and things like that, where everything is just taking files and manipulating them and, you know, saving them with slightly different names. So I know that I resized it and all that kind of stuff. So that just feels so, I'm using that much of my actual physical existence in order to do work. So it feels good to have something that's like huge and needs my entire body in order to create it.
Um, sorry. Going back to like, take when I see your paintings, Katie, it really shows how as uh, we see the world like differently as artists, and I like the fact that you took the shapes and everything. You went for more of how you remembered it instead of how like realism. And I think experimentation and we, when I saw these paintings, I really saw like the artist behind it, is what I'm saying. The pictures.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think I've become more over time that way. You start out being, especially in class where you're starting, in drawing and painting where people maybe set up a something for you to sketch in class and you become very kind of obsessed with capturing what you're seeing. So I do think it takes time sometimes to break down, to absorb those lessons, but then break down into your own interpretation of how you want to do things. I think there's something to that, where you start out very literal. There's a fruit display in class that you are sketching is where it starts, like for me 20 years ago. And then eventually you have to just be like, you know what, it's the idea of the fruit. It's not necessarily the fruit. It's, what I really remember about it? What is the essence of what I'm trying to get at? So I feel like that's a lot of the, where I'm moving towards, but I think it takes time to get there. And sometimes you just need a few solid reference points for a landscape to be like, that is definitely that location, but the rest is, kind of open to interpretation.
Thank you so much. That was so informative and your work is beautiful. Interesting because we have the actual work to look at and then the big screen is bleached as compared to the laptop, which is over to the right, but the colors are much truer. So it's like three different ways digital, different digital interpretations, but then the real thing.
Yeah. Like I said, I think in person the work is much more, present and vibrant. So sometimes it can be hard to convey in digital. But thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. Glad I got to share it with you all.
Thank you so much. And I will post this, I'll send you a YouTube link.
Thank you.